the voice of evil. Adrian, Adrian. The voice was low, commanding, deep, near. The girl awakened from her stupor, stirred on the hard ground, and drew her wet cloak about her with a deep, weary shudder. The voice, it had seemed so close. She gazed about her into the darkness, but saw no one. Adrian, 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 answer me. I am here, she muttered. She felt ill, feverish, dazed. She spoke into the darkness, and in the darkness came the answer. Speak again, Adrian, speak again, I command you. Here, I am here, she said weakly. She sank down on the ground. She wanted to sleep, and not to waken. The horrors she had seen and experienced pressed too close. Life was not welcome. Chapter 1. Adrienne Codeil was informed on reaching the White Stag Inn that the coach was only an hour and a quarter late, having made excellent time. Fatigued, her bonnet set sideways on her blonde curls, she could only nod and try to smile. She was so weary, she wished only to stretch her limbs and wash her face. Rain had been pouring down for the past 2 hours, as the coach had lumbered its way along the Cornish moors, past flat lanes and glimpses of small neat farms. Adrienne had peered out again and again, curious at this look at the new land. She had lived near the sea, on the south coast, all her 17 years. She could not keep the unwelcome reflection from herself that she did much prefer the sea, the blue, the green, the wild, the lovely sea, in all its moods. But her life was to be changed now, changed forever, and there was not much she could do about it. All she could do was accept the changes and hope for the best. She tried to think of an appropriate poem to suit the mood, yet even this failed her. Her father had quoted poetry by the hour, in addition to making up his own, and Adrienne had formed the habit of writing small, shy verses of her own. But the events of the past months had been so big, so appalling, that she could not find refuge even in writing poetry. Her dear father was dead, the pillar of her life, the stalwart strength which had upheld her always, especially the time since her mother had died when she was 10. He was now gone. Injured at sea, a rope line catching and flinging him against an iron post, laying helplessly for months, finally dying with her mother's name on his lips. Tears began to form again in her large blue eyes. She looked at rain-blurred landscape through thick lashes filled with salt tears. This would never do, she thought. She was fortunate in having a relative left in the world. And he, a wealthy man, lord of Castle Codeil, he had written a kindly letter to her when she had informed him of her father's death. She was to come with her maid to this White Stag Inn, and he would meet her and convey her to his own. He would have a care for her, as she had been related to his late beloved mother, he had said. She had clung to the words during the times of packing, selling the small cottage by the sea and her father's share in the boat. She had clung to the lines of his letters, the large upright bold hand in the black ink, reading them again and again for comfort. He would have a care for her, a care for her. She left the coach at the White Stag Inn. A careless landlord in a dirty smock greeted her curtly, turning up his nose, she thought, at the intelligence that she had no maid with her. He had conveyed her to the inn parlor and told her curtly that there was no man here to meet her. But we are quite late, she whispered timidly, gazing up at him anxiously. Surely no one has come and gone again. No one has come at all, miss. Not for you, he said roughly, giving a glance at her ancient gray cloak, her gray bonnet, the tumbled blonde curls and mended gray gloves. I'm expecting a grand gentleman, and he has the good parlor. You're not to go in there, miss. Mind now." "Oh, yes, sir. I shan't go in there," she said hastily. They passed the good parlor, and she had a glimpse of chins and crystals set grandly on the white lace cloth, flowers in a vase, and oh, the smell of roast beef and greens and pastries, and a dozen wine bottles were set out on side tables. She was aware of an immense hunger. Might she ask for tea and bread? She opened her lips to request them. She had a little money with her to pay. But the landlord left her at the door of the inn parlor and raced out again to the courtyard. Discouraged, she went into the dark parlor and removed her cloak and bonnet. She saw herself in a dingy mirror and exclaimed, "Oh dear, how dreadful! I look a fright." She tried to smooth down the ruffled blonde curls, but nothing restored color to the pale, weary face or brightened the tired blue eyes. She sat down limply on the horse-ride sofa and tried to be grateful that it was not swaying and lurching like the coach seat. She searched in a large faded flowery carpeting for the beloved much-read letter and read it slowly again. She had not mistaken the day. The bold handwriting said the day, the time the coach would arrive, the place, all very clearly. He would come. He must come, she thought. She drooped against the hard sofa and wished she might sleep. It was growing late in the day. The sky had faded to a misty darker gray. The rain was clearing, but it was growing colder. Did they have a long way yet to go? October 1850, and she was but 17. She mused, staring unseeingly at the lines of the comforting letter. Where would she be when she was 18 and 19? Would he obtain a post for her, as a governess, perhaps? What would he do with her? She sighed deeply, then sat up straight and tried to brace her courage. Suddenly, she was aware of a powerful, strong masculine voice, and it was saying words, oh, such words. She had heard some of them a few times from some of the rougher fishermen who worked with the father. An impulse, she jumped up from the sofa and went to the door of the parlor, but she heard little. The girl went on down the hall to the courtyard door of the inn and stared wide-eyed at the sight before her. The coach from which she had stepped down was still in the courtyard, empty. The horses were being changed. Near the coach was a smart carriage with golden trim and dark red paint, with a crest on the door, but she had no eyes for this now. The tall, dark-haired man commanded all her attention, and indeed the attention of the entire force of the inn. The landlord was cringing before him at the cold, hard voice, at the cursing which was being flung at him. "You are a damn bastard. You ought to be whipped. I gave you explicit instructions. You were to have the lady wait in comfort. You were to give her every care." "But she did not come," the landlord wailed. The man lifted his hands in smart black gloves, and the landlord cringed, as thought, expecting to be struck. The man cursed him again, deliberately, his dark green eyes flashing like fiery coals. A stable boy near Adrian whispered a thought to himself. "Lord, if I could talk like that, swell." "Who is the man?" asked Adrian softly. The stable boy glanced up at her, his dark eyes wide. "Lord, is Lord Satan, he is." She caught her breath sharply. "Lord Satan? Lord Satan? Lord Satan?" She thought of John Milton's marvelous poem, Paradise Lost, and the lines her father had quoted in his sonorous voice about Lucifer, who had fallen from the sky and become Satan. He, above the rest, in shape and gesture proudly eminent, stood like a tower. His form had yet not lost all her original brightness, nor appeared less than archangel ruined, and the excess of glory obscured. She murmured a phrase to herself, archangel ruined, and looked fascinated at the man. He was like Lucifer himself, she thought, proud, haughty, his cheeks scarred in a strange line, from left eye to left side of the mouth, in an irregular pattern. As he cursed the landlord afresh, she stared at him, wide-eyed, and listened to the melodic flow of the terrible words, the wild grand inflection of his voice. She watched the proud, passionate face, the impression toss of the black head. Then, abruptly, he turned, and saw her staring at him. His voice stopped abruptly. He stared at her in turn. The green eyes were flashing. The gaze seemed to sear her. She could not move, nor take a look from his. As he stared, his face changed. It seemed to light from a radiance within, and she thought, like Lucifer before the fall. She gazed, bewildered, as he strode toward her. As he came, in a little graceful walk, he stripped off his thick black gloves, and she saw his white hands, large, graceful, smooth. One was held out to her. He came close. His hand was still out, imperiously. She put her own small one in it. Slowly, she could not deny him. He smiled down at her, glancing over her tangled blonde hair, the wide blue eyes, the pale weary face, the small rounded body in the shabby gray dress. He said, Adrian, and she thought her name had never sounded so beautiful. Adrian, you came. Yes, sir, she said softly. Come, he said, and turned her shoulders gently so that she went before him into the inn. He paused at the door of the good parlor and conducted her inside. She turned toward him, opened her mouth to explain that it was for some special grand gentleman. Then she understood. He was the grand gentleman, and he must be her cousin. Little Adrian, he said again, in a gentle, melodic, persuasive voice. How weary you must be, and to be greeted like this? Come, sit down. You shall have a small glass of wine, just your size, and then a good dinner, before we continue to the castle. Where is your maid? He glanced about, as thought expecting a respectable woman to materialize. Oh, sir, I'm sorry. I have no maid. It was necessary for me to come alone. She gazed up at him trustfully as he set a glass in her hand. The wine was red, bubbly, stronger than any she had had, but he seemed to know just what he was doing. You came alone? So you have courage as well as beauty, little cousin. Oh, forgive me. I have not introduced myself. I felt as though we knew each other already. And he smiled down at her with great charm. I am Vincent Stanton, your cousin. Yes, sir, she said, and thought of his titles amongst them. Lord de Vereux, Lord of Castle Codeil, Viscount of something else, and on and on. You must call me Vincent, and I shall call you Adrian, he said comfortably, and seated himself in the plump chair beside her. A maid came in to cut the meat and place large slices on beautiful chintz plates. He raised this glass to her lips. She still hesitated. Drink it, little one. It will put some color in your cheeks and strengthen you for the long journey I fear is still before you. It is another 5 hours to your future home. She could not repress a sight, but lifted the glass obediently. It tasted strong, flary, yet good. She sipped it cautiously, and he watched her with a little smile. You are like a little blonde angel, he said, musingly. You look like you should be dusted and replaced on the shelf, to be an ornament and a joy to all in the castle." Mischievously, he reached out and tugged one of her blonde curls. She stiffened and said earnestly, "Oh, sir, I'm used to hard work, really, sir. I shall earn my keep, I assure you. I have kept the house and cleaned, and I'm counted a fairly good cook. I have learned my sums and can read and write." His teasing smile altered. He kept gazing at her as though he would study her and know her through and through. He took her free hand and studied it, looked at the redness and roughness of it laying in his large, smooth, white hand. "So, you have worked hard, little one." "Yes, I see that." "Well, you shall have a rest at the castle, your new home, I assure you. One so pretty and dainty should never have to work, but all that later. Come, let us eat, and be on our way." He rose and drew her over to the table, where the maid waited anxiously to see if he would approve of her serving. His glance flicked over the table. He directed her in two matters, which she corrected at once. Then he drew out a chair for Adrienne and seated her as though she were a grand lady. He sat across from her and served her plate and teased her into eating more than she had wanted. There was rich slices of roast beef and thick gravy and potatoes and greens and some fruit tart, and with it the hearty tea she craved. She drank 2 chintz cups of the fine tea and gently refused more wine. "Indeed, sir, the wine I have had has made my head so queerish," she said earnestly. "I fear I am not accustomed to it." "It is not an occasion for apology," he said, and changed the conversation. She was aware that he watched her closely, though his glance flicked away when it seemed to embarrass her. She wondered if she ate with the correct forks, or if she looked too country and dowdy for him. He had been flattering to her, but perhaps it was just to set her at ease. He had the air of a great gentleman, she thought, and surely the really great gentlemen had the gift of being gracious to even the most lowly of their relatives. Finally, they finished. He escorted her out to his grand coach with a flourish. She found her small trunk, and her faded carpet bag had been placed inside by someone. The landlord smirked and groveled before her, as he did before the lord, who dismissed him curtly and glared at him. In the coach, the lord said, "I do not injure fools gladly," and he sounded quite enraged, his green eyes blazing again. "He did not follow my orders. You were to be given every comfort and attention on your arrival. I warned him of my late arrival." He gave the signal to his groom, who sprang up on the box. Soon the coach was rolling so smoothly down the highway that she gave a sigh of relief. It was not at all like the lurching and swaying of the public coach, she thought. This was so luxurious, so easy. "I expect," she said after the little pause, "that the landlord did not expect me to be the lady you expected, that this is why he was so unwelcoming." "You would find excuses for the devil himself," said her cousin musingly. He smiled down at her quickly, his green eyes mischievous. "Would you not, cousin?" "I do not know, sir," she said, startled, thinking of the way the stable boy had spoken of him. Lord Satan. "You are weary. Lean back and rest. Sleep if you can. It is a long journey yet before we arrive home." He settled himself back in the coach against the comfortable velvet puffs, and seemed to take his own advice, closing his disturbing eyes. She finally stirred herself and settled back against the cushions. He had put a warm rug about her, and she felt so very good, with the fine dinner and wine inside her, and the thick fur rug over her, and the gentleness with which he had treated her. Her eyes were heavy. She closed them, her thick lashes resting on her cheeks. She would not sleep, but she would rest for a little time, rest her eyes. The rain had started again, and the hard clatter of it on the roof made her glad she was inside the coach, and so very warm and cared for. Her head dropped. She jerked it upright. It drooped again, found a resting place, and with a sigh she gave herself up to sleep. She was only vaguely aware of the horses being pulled up, of shouting and a smooth voice telling someone to be quiet. She stirred and sat up slowly, looking about. "Oh, shall we stop for a time?" she asked sleepily. "We're home, little cousin. So you are finally awake?" There was amusement and tenderness in his tone. His arms were only slowly falling from around her. She had slept, she was aware, against his chest. That was the warm, strong refuge her head had found, and the heartbeat, which in her dreams she had thought was the sea, had been the even strong beat of his heart under her ear. She lifted her hand to her bonnet, flushed to find it had been removed, and was laying near the floor of the coach, on the fur rug. The coach had pulled up at the foot of a long, steep flight of stairs. She peered out past his broad shoulders and thought she would never make it. Up the long stone step loomed the towers of a huge stone castle, immense, green, forbidding. "Oh, it's so huge, so very big," she whispered, aghast. "You shall be comfortable here, little one," he reassured her quickly. "Come." He had stepped out and reached in the coach to help her. She stumbled getting out. She was still half asleep. Before she knew it, he had swung her up in his powerful arms and was carrying her easily up the long flight of stairs. She blinked up at him. "I can walk, sir." He smiled down at her. "I doubt that, my little angel. You are still asleep. Trust me," he said gently. "I will not let you fall." He carried her into a huge entrance hall, where torches lit a green stone floor, huge walls, iron and steel weapons on the mammoth ceiling and walls, thick red hangings decorated with battle flags. He set her down gently in the entrance room beyond, where a neat woman waited her, wearing a black satin gown. "Adrian, this is Miss Griffith, my housekeeper. Miss Griffith, you will have every care of my little cousin, Miss Adrian Codeil." The housekeeper was staring at her, forgetting to speak. Adrian thought she must look indeed a fright. Or was it that the older woman was shocked at the lord carrying her in that fashion? She smiled timidly, finally held out her hand shyly. It was received warmly in a large, almost masculine grip. "Welcome to Castle Codeil, my Miss Codeil," said the woman slowly. "She is very weary. You shall take her up to her room, tuck her into bed, and bring her some hot tea." "Will that suit you, Adrian?" said the man standing behind her. She could feel the heat of his body close to hers, like some protecting guardian, she thought vaguely. "Oh, yes, sir. I regret I am so very tired," she said, and added, "Tomorrow I shall learn my duties, and I shall try very hard to please you." Unexpectedly, he chuckled. He touched her cheek with a careless finger. "You please me already, little cousin. Come, I will show you your rooms, and you shall tell me if you like them." The housekeeper went before them, her black satin skirt swishing up the broad stone staircase. The center of the stairs was covered with a dark red carpet, and at the landing were fine marble statues, such as Adrian had seen in books of Greece. Then, at the top of the stairs, just past the landing, he paused, and made her stop by touching her with his hand at her elbow. "Look, Adrian, do you know who this is?" He was pointing up at the painting. She blinked and stared. Oh, it looks like..." The woman in the large painting was blonde and small and pretty, a face so sweet and gentle that she seemed to welcome Adrian with a smile. The long hair hung in blonde curls. The eyes were as green as Vincent Stanton's flashing green eyes, but the face, the form, were like those of Adrian and of her own lost mother. "She looks like my mother and me," whispered Adrian. He smiled down at her. "Yes, I lost my mother some years ago, little one. When I saw you today, I thought for a moment that she had returned to me. I loved her dearly. You are doubly welcome here, dear Adrian, for yourself and for your resemblance to my own lost one." He tucked her hand in his arm, and they on down to the door where the housekeeper waited for them. Adrian felt overwhelmed. Vincent's hard face had softened marvelously had he had spoken of his mother. He had loved her as much as she loved her own mother, and she resembled his mother. She had no time to puzzle about this or realize its implications. Vincent ushered her into a large room. She gasped, her eyes growing so wide she thought they must fill her face. The large room was a living room, with beautiful cream-colored drapes, flowered sofas and chairs, little puffy stools for footrests, plum cushions and flowers everywhere on wall marble-topped carved wood tables. The rug was a precious French one, a large oval in cream and rose and blue. Vincent trod on it as though not even seeing it, leading her beyond the room to the bedroom. "I hope you will be comfortable here, little one," he said, and drew her into the bedroom. It was almost as large as the living room. It was dominated by an immense carved wood bed of rich cherry color, topped by an immense canopy of cream silk, puffed with thick spread of matching cream satin. Everywhere were vases of flowers, roses and cream and blue flowers of unknown varieties, which gave forth a subtle scent. Vincent flicked her cheek carelessly and departed before she could thank him. She was overwhelmed, speechless, so weary that tears filled her eyes as the housekeeper helped her undress and put her into the immense bed.